Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahushai Ba'ashem, Rachagudash, and double honors to my elder apostles, a great millstone, and peace and salutation to the hopeful members of the elect, the Bacharim, the house of David, that's been preordained, predestined to be delivered in these last times, and to be the ruling governing body of the nation Yash'Allah. I want to go into a lesson, as you can see on the screen. If not, this is from Zero Hedge, and the title is War, Debt, and Distraction: The Hidden Collapse behind the Iran Hype. Okay, published today, Saturday, July 12th, 2025. Okay, and I'm gonna go through this article. All right, get some scriptures. So let's dive in. All right, because again, it says war, debt, and destruction, the hidden collapse behind the Iran hype. All right, and all these nations are in cahoots with one another. Okay, this is all being orchestrated. This war, everything. Okay, actually, what's that scripture in Psalms? Don't think that they are really at odds with one another. No, the elites control everything. Esau, Edom's blessing, he's ruling his kingdom, his blessing to rule everything, to have control of the resources and the substance, and he has dominion over these nations, and he controls the propaganda, the controlled opposition. All right, now the elite families, they might be fighting for power amongst each other, but they still are on one accord. Okay, they still want to implement their new order, microchip the masses. That's the mark of the beast. Okay, the RFID chip. Revelation 13 chapter. Okay, but all these nations, they may be fighting with one another, but they are still in cahoots. It's just all orchestrated. It's war. Okay, read the Albert Pike plan. All these wars are orchestrated. World War I, World War II, World War III. All right, the casualties are real, of course, but behind it, it's all being orchestrated and manipulated. All right. Psalms 2 verse 1. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? Right. Imagine, to really put us down, the Israelites, they wanted us to be separate from a power. Because the elite of the elites, they truly know who we are, and they know once we get back with our power, we'll be ruling, we'll be on top. They don't want that. All right. But they don't understand prophecy. Yahushua is going to return, destroy this man's system. Hell, this man's going to destroy his own self in the process as well, the ICBM missiles. But the Lord's going to deliver the elect, and the elect is going to be the first dominion, the first fruit to rule. All right, 2/3 of our people are going to be wiped out, but they're going to come back again in the kingdom of heaven. All right, but we're going to rule this whole earth in righteousness, because this earth does need new management. All right, it says the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. The anointed are who? The Israelites, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. Right. They want to, keep us away from our true heritage so we can be an eternal slave. They want us to be at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. All right. They don't want us to know who we truly are as Israelites. They want us to keep on believing that we're Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans. And you have Israelites, again, all around the world who are going to look like the heathen, okay? But the bulk, are, again, the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, okay? So it says, while we are all having our attention directed towards the war with Iran, we should always be looking at the why, keeping in mind the absolutely true adage that all wars are banker wars. Right, all wars are banker wars. I noted this from Zero Hedge. War, these bankers make money off wars. U.S. plans to ease capital rule, limiting banks' treasury trades. So while we're being directed towards the Middle East, I note the easing of the capital rule on banks. This, together with the war, are absolutely, totally part of the same equation, despite the fact that not one in a 100 folks will ever know or realize it. And for that very reason, it will progress. Here's a problem. So I'm just going to read, and then I'm going to break it all down, okay? The U.S. government has quietly initiated a stealth liquidity backdoor for banks by easing capital requirements on treasury trades. This means banks no longer need to reserve as much capital when holding or trading U.S. government debt, making banks dodgier than they already are. They can now soak up more treasury issuance without showing increased risk on their balance sheets, making banks dodgier than they already are. Okay. This injects artificial demand into the treasury market. It helps paper over collapsing organic demand while making banks dodgier than they already are. While what this really means is the treasury market, the backbone of the current financial system, is now so fragile and overburdened with issuance that it can no longer function without regulatory distortion. And they want to collapse the system, okay? They are orchestrating this collapse to make this dollar obsolete, which is already failing, and to bring in a new currency, all right? It's gonna switch over to the digital, the CBDC, but ultimately the main goal is a chip, okay? Aaron Russo, watch that interview. He had dinner with one of the Rockefellers, or one of the elites, I believe it was the Rockefellers. All right, Nick Rockefeller, or Nathan Rockefeller, okay? He told him the plan. He even brought up 9/11 before it happened, which 9/11, that was orchestrated, all right, to bring in what, the Patriot Act, full surveillance on civilians, on American civilians, and, to go over there to the Middle East and get resources and take resources, all right, what Esau always does. He robs, he murders, he steals, okay? It says, the U.S. government is now issuing a whooping $1 to $2 trillion, $1, it's like $1 to $2 trillion in new debt every quarter. Foreign buyers like China and Japan are net sellers. Domestic demand for treasuries is not keeping up. Yields are becoming increasingly unhinged from real risk. I always thought they tapped the boomers' capital sitting in pension funds, mandating percentages to be allocated to safety or some such hogwash. But this is a new one that I admit I did not see coming. They're turning banks into forced buyers by changing the rules, sneaky buggers. It won't be called yield curve control, but this is exactly what it is, and it stinks of desperation. So where does the Iran distraction come in? Exactly here. War is a cover for liquidity expansion. War equals narrative control. War is a moral justification for massive capital deployment, and war means optical deferral of systemic accountability. They screwed up Biggie, but can't admit to it, because by doing so we get a revolution. Far better to send the peasants into a meat grinder more than Ukraine. The Iran surprise hype machine serves a dual purpose. Emotionally spike public attention away from the fact that the U.S. is suffering from domestic insolvency. I want to get that word, insolvency. Okay, insolvency, same thing, right? But let me just get this. Insolvency is a state where a company or individual is unable to meet their financial obligations as they become due. This means they cannot pay their debts when they are due to be paid. It's a financial situation that can proceed or lead to bankruptcy. So key characteristics: inability to pay debts. Insolvency occurs when a debtor's assets are insufficient to cover their liabilities, or when they cannot generate enough cash to meet payment deadlines. Not necessarily bankruptcy. Potential for reversal causes insolvency can arise from various factors, including poor financial management, economic downturns, and unexpected events or excessive debt. Okay, so a state where a company or individual is unable to meet their financial obligations as they become due. This means they cannot pay their debts when they are due to be paid. It's a financial situation that can proceed or lead to bankruptcy. And America is very much in debt, all right? Which that was all orchestrated, to collapse this dollar. Creates a narrative for justifying increased military spending and debt expansion, all under the guise of national security. The deep state truly is in control, okay? A few more. They're not trying to hide the debt anymore. They're trying to normalize the next phase of collapse by staging urgency elsewhere. And they are, definitely putting up these distractions, okay? Because they don't want the masses to know that America is in debt, all right? The Ukraine war, all these other distractions, the Epstein list, Diddy. The U.S. is entering a phase where the legitimacy of the dollar system depends entirely on manufacturing belief. And when belief wanes, control mechanisms shift from fiscal logic to mimetic warfare. This is why capital rules are being gutted in silence. All the while, state media channels scream about world-changing surprises, Trump's big beautiful bill, and existential threats, Russia bad, Iran bad, yada yada yada. It is simply another step in the process of a failing empire. Yes. And their goal is to what? To establish their new world order. Okay, but they're only going to get so far. Okay, they're only going to get so far, man. They're going to chip a lot of people, but sooner or later, this place is going to be destroyed. America and Yahushua is going to return in the midst of that. All right, when missiles be shot off, deliver the elect. But once we come back down, but we're not part of that. But the elect, once they come back down, they're going to truly have dominion of the earth. All right, Job 5 verse 12, he disappointed the devices of the crafty. He is talking about Yahushua, disappointed the devices of the crafty. Esau's agenda, what he wants to plan and implement. Ultimately, what? Depopulation, the chip. Okay, he's gonna, succeed in those things. Some of it, all right, depopulation. Somewhat. It's gonna be a lot of corpse out here, a lot of corpses out here. Chipping a lot of people. Okay, but it's all gonna. His plan's not gonna come fully in fruition. All right, he's only gonna get so far. Shah's gonna basically, put a monkey wrench in this man's plan, so that their hands cannot perform the enterprise, a new world order. They're not gonna perform the enterprise, man. They're not gonna, accomplish what they want to accomplish. All right, so I got ChatGPT to, break this down in simpler terms. So the main idea, the Iran war hype isn't about geopolitics. It's a deliberate diversion. The author argues that governments and media are amplifying fears about Iran to distract from a deeper collapse in the economy, the U.S. dollar system. Okay, what they're saying, economic collapse is underway. According to the article, the U.S. dollar relies heavily on people's belief in it. That belief is shaking, yet officials haven't openly said the system is faltering. Right, and it's fiat currency, It's backed by nothing, all right? The U.S. dollar is really solely based on, the government, all right? But it's backed by nothing. Because why? They took the gold. It was once upon a time backed by gold, but they took that out. And I asked, when was the gold taken out of the U.S. dollar? Because that's, back then you had a U.S. dollar like it was a banknote, and behind it was backed by gold. You'll get gold and you get gold, okay? 1933, end of gold-backed dollars domestically under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The U.S. stopped allowing citizens to exchange dollars for gold, right? So 1933, Executive Order 6102, April 5th, 1933. And hey, during the 30s is what? The Great Depression as well, okay? Forced Americans to turn in their gold coins, bullion, and certificates to Federal Reserve. In 1934, the Gold Reserve Act gave the U.S. government full ownership of all gold and raised the price of gold from $20 to $35 an ounce to devalue the dollar and boost the economy. From this point on, U.S. citizens could no longer redeem dollars for gold, but foreign governments still could. Oh, give me 1 second, okay? I gotta, just 1 second. I'm gonna pause this. Okay, I'm back. So it says, 1933, that's when they first started taking the gold out of the U.S. dollar, okay? Executive Order 6102, April 5th, 1933, forced Americans to turn in their gold coins, bullion, and certificates to the Federal Reserve, all right? So the last part again, from this point on, U.S. citizens could no longer redeem dollars for gold, but foreign governments still could. 1971, full break from the gold standard, Nixon shot. On August 15th, 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the convertibility of the US dollar into gold for foreign governments. This move closed the gold window and effectively ended the Bretton Woods system, which had fixed currencies to the dollar and the dollar to gold, right? So it was just, it completely ended, gold being, the US dollar being backed by gold. Nixon's actions meant no currency in the world was backed by gold anymore, and the dollar became a fiat currency backed by the trust in the US government rather than a physical commodity, right? Sum it all up, 1933, Franklin, what was his name again? Franklin D. Roosevelt, gold redemption, ends gold redemption for citizens. Effect, domestic gold standard ends, right? America, right? 1971, Nixon ends dollar gold convertibility for foreign nations. Global gold standard ends. Okay, so let's go back. So let's go back. It says number 2, right? So what they're saying, manufacturing consent through fear instead of addressing this rising debt and economic weaknesses, the powers that be are spotlighting Iran and other geopolitical threats to keep public attention elsewhere, right? Distractions, quiet changes to the financial rules. At the same time, important financial regulations are being watered down, but in silence, so most people won't notice. Mimetic warfare, rather than using good old-fashioned policy, the U.S. is supposedly increasingly relying on manufacturing narratives, memes, news cycles, hype to shape public perception and sidestep any real solutions. Right? I want to look at that word, mimetic. Okay, mimetic, relating to or constituting an element of a culture or system of behavior that is passed from one individual to another by imitation or other non-genetic means. Beliefs that survive aren't necessarily true, rules that survive aren't necessarily fair, and rituals that survive aren't necessarily necessary. Okay, what example of mimetic, how to perform a particular dance step, how to build I guess that's probably something else, but yeah, give me some synonyms. Okay, so relating to or constituting an element, culture, or system of behavior that is passed from one individual to another by imitation. Okay. So let's go back. Slovakia. It says, so what's the takeaway? The hype around Iran, a smokescreen, right? That's all it is. That's all it is. Man, it's all orchestrated. Don't act like these nations are really against one another. It's all orchestrated. Okay. The casualties are real, but the elites behind all this, they're orchestrating all of this. The article suggests this is all about distracting the public from major economic problems like crushing debt, shaky dollar trust, and a looming financial collapse. Right, to keep the people distracted while behind the scenes, I should say, they're collapsing this place. They're setting up the new world order, increments. Okay, control through distraction. By bombarding us with headlines about Iran or Trump's big beautiful bill, the author believes the government is pushing public attention away from the real issues, right? In plain terms, think of it like this. Imagine a sinking boat, the economy, right? Instead of telling everyone to fix the hole, the crew turns on loud music, which is what Iran crisis headlines, hoping passengers won't notice. They quietly toss out important tools, regulations to lighten the load. And when you start wondering if the boat is sinking, they tell you, no, focus on the Iran noise, the critical view. This isn't a mainstream news perspective. It's a rooted conspiracy style thinking from a site known from, but this is real though, okay? Final thought, the argument we're being played, right? The goal, distract us from real economic instability. Yeah, that's the goal, distract us from real economic instability. The change, stay informed by looking past the headlines and paying attention to hard financial trends like debt, inflation, and dollar strength. And we're heading into, hyperinflation we're heading into a hyper inflated nationwide society. Okay, in America, we're heading into that. Even shrinkage inflation. All right, less commodities, or less, the items been reduced. All right, for example, a bag of chips, but the price, there's less chips in the bag. Right, it's mostly air, but the price went up. Okay, shrinkage inflation. All right, let me look that up real quick. Shrinkage inflation, real quick. Shrinkage inflation. And shrinkage inflation is a corporate strategy that involves reducing the size or quantity of a product while maintaining the price or rising it. Right, so you know, reducing the size or quantity of a product while maintaining the price, or increasing inflation. All right, so I also get some scriptures. The first one I liked is, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as a travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Right, 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 3. And they want you to think, things are all good and gravy. All right, they want you to think that. But again, when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. Because that's coming. All that hell's about to break loose. A time like never before. Daniel's 12 chapters. Jeremiah 30 verse 6 and 7. Jacob's trouble. All right, but they want you to think everything's all smooth and gravy when it's not. Okay. All right. And then this nation is in debt. All right. Habakkuk. Actually, I could have got that from here. Let me see. Habakkuk. Let's see. Habakkuk. Habakkuk 2 verse 6. "Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that laid himself with thick clay." Right, and Esau just goes around, robs, steals, he takes what's not his. "And to him that laid himself with thick clay." All right, and that word thick clay in the Hebrew is, and I'm not going to take too much of your time. All right, I'm going to just hit this scripture, and then possibly just one more. Go to have. Okay. All right. That word thick clay meaning debt. All right. Abayit. Right. Abayit. Weight pledges heavy debts. Right. And America's in debt. All right. Orchestrated debt. They want to collapse the system and bring in a new system. Okay. Again, the RFID chip. Totally submission. Totally, make you people servants. All right. But they're only going to go so far, and all that's going to be destroyed. Yahweh Shah is going to set up his kingdom. And this kingdom, again, this system is going to be destroyed. None of you heathens are ever going to rule ever again, man. Call out Yahweh Shah. And the earth is going to be, it's going to, what's the word? Be refreshed. All right. Israelites, we're going to be good, starting with the elect. What scripture that one? James 5 verse 3. It says, "Your gold and your silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasure together for the last days." I want to get that NLT version. NLT, okay. It says, "Your gold and your silver are corroded." Right, this man's system, this man's economy is failing, He literally took away the gold standard out the U.S. dollar. So it's fiat. It's backed by nothing. All right. "The very wealth you were counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. This corroded treasure you have hoarded will testify against you on the day of judgment." Right. This man has hoarded all the gold, the silver, most of it, and not doing anything with it. And that's all he does is go around, rape, robbing, and stealing from everybody. All right. What's that scripture in? But again, this place is in debt, man. All right. what's that in Ecclesiastes 10, I think. Right, 10 verse Ecclesiastes 10 verse 8, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit. That's how Esau got everything, the dominion of the earth. I mean, besides his sword, his his military power. All right. He has lied. He has broken treaties and covenants, so to speak, with people. All right, but he has used propaganda. Okay, he's got riches all by deceit. The kingdom is translated from one people to another. Right. This place is going to again, America's gonna be destroyed. Okay, America's gonna be destroyed, man. All right, and we're gonna rule in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, we're going to rule in the kingdom of heaven. All right, our rulership is coming up next. 2 Ezra 6 verse 9. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, their world is ending right before our eyes. We're in the last days. We're in the last seconds, the last days. And Jacob, the Israelites, we're going to rule, starting with the Lord's elect. Okay, we're going to have dominion on this earth, and it's going to be, man, beautiful, and it's going to be forever. And man, the earth is going to be refreshed, okay? You see? And I just wanted to say one thing, too, going back to that gold, and the US dollar. Gold and silver, that's real money. And gold and silver has benefits, Even, if you look at the periodic table, all right, the atomic number for, like, gold, I believe is, like, 47. Silver, I forgot what number, but it has a low electroid valence. Valence meaning, the electrons are more loose. They can travel freely. All right, within the atom. Okay, within the atom, because you have electrons, protons, and neurons. All right, and the neurons and protons are within that nucleus. The electrons are outside in that cloud. But either way, the whole point is, they're good for, it's a good electricity conductor. All right, same with gold. All right, and gold doesn't corrode. That's why they use silver in satellites and military weapons. All right, gold for like technology in your phones. But gold has so much benefits, and that's real money. The US dollar ain't shit. It's just fucking paper, man. Again, it's not backed by anything. Just trust in the government. All right, and that's a false balance, man. That's a false balance. All right, ain't backed by nothing. Okay, and this man's just prompting US dollars and shit. And this place is already in debt. All right, so yeah, man, this man need to be put out. He's going to be put out of rulership. All right, this is all just. This man does not know how to rule. All right, and it shows. He destroys ecosystems. Destroying the minds of these people. They're perplexed. As the scriptures say, people shall be in perplexity, confusion. All right. Destroying the earth, destroying people. And ultimately, he's trying to destroy us Israelites, with the apple of the Most High's eye. And he's successfully done it, Our people are gone. All right, Jacob's through. Okay, so Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. And all right, and on to the next one. Shalom.